Hello everyone, and welcome to my talk, Game On, How to Start Working in Game Development. Let me just get my notes up. Yeah, basically, this talk is for people who are interested in working in game development or just know they like games and want to make them, but they have no idea where to begin because everyone who is currently in the industry started in that exact same place. So I thought I'd share some useful information I picked up, which will be helpful to anyone who wants to start their game development journey. So here's what we're going to be covering in this talk. I'm going to be talking for around 30-ish minutes, and then we'll have time for questions and answers at the end. And basically, we're quickly going to give a bit of context as to who I am, what the games industry actually is, and then we're going to look at the actual roles you can do in the industry, how we can learn how to do those roles, what the tools are to actually make games, cool resources, and then we'll have a little Q&A at the end. Right, so who am I? Since December last year, I've been the studio administrator at a little studio called Beta Jester, and I recently passed my 6-month review, so yay! I've been the producer, director, and co-founder at a little studio called Fat Familiar since late 2019 after I graduated from university. I'm a podcast producer at Game Dev London since last June with the people who helped run this. I'm also a Women in Games ambassador, which basically means I help women and girls who are interested in the games industry. Great. So, my path into games. So, same as everyone else, I was doing my GCSEs. I thought, I'll do my A-levels to try and get some good enough qualifications to go to university, study game development. That didn't go very well at all. I learned the hard way that A-levels was not for me. But that's fine because I went to college instead, where I studied BTech Level 3 Creative Media Production in Games Development, where I got good enough grades to go to university and study BA Honours Games Art and Design. And in my final year of university, I started doing some games industry freelance work alongside my studies. And I actually found my first ever freelance gig through this student newsletter we got in our email. So remember to check your emails, guys. They sometimes have really important stuff. Then I graduated and I co-founded my own studio with some friends from university. Continued to work on my studio part-time whilst also doing freelance work to support myself financially. And then eventually, as of last year, got properly employed at a game studio. So it's important to note that everyone's career path into games looks very different. Like some people will go straight into games from once they've finished education. Some people will spend years or even decades doing other jobs before they decide they actually want to work in games. And they use their transferable skills from those other jobs in games. It's very flexible. But let's also talk about what actually is the games industry. So the Wikipedia definition is the video game industry is the industry that connects with the development, marketing, and monetization of video games. It includes studios of many sizes, includes huge studios with hundreds and thousands of employees to smaller studios with only a handful of members to solo developers. Here in the UK, it's very large, as in it's worth a lot of money, as in it's worth more than music and film combined, which is pretty crazy. But it's also very small in that everyone in the industry in the UK knows each other. It's a bit weird. Like you will see the exact same people at the events and they're like all friends with each other. It's quite wholesome. Yeah, it is still relatively new compared to other industries, as in the games industry only really started emerging in the late 70s and early 80s, which is still quite a long time ago, but compared to other industries like film and music, it's still relatively new. And to be completely transparent, like most industries, it does have its issues. Like some of the biggest issues in the industry at the moment include crunch culture, which is basically working overtime, lack of job stability, and lack of diversity and inclusion. However, things are improving. They are slowly but steadily getting better. Game workers are unionizing. They're advocating for diversity and inclusion. When you're looking at companies, I would recommend checking the reviews online. Like the website Glassdoor is a good website. That's where current and former employees can leave reviews. And also just make sure their views align with yours. But overall, it is full of lovely people working together to make amazing games. Right, let's talk about all the different types of roles that you can do. So, first and foremost, this industry is about collaboration. This is a non-exhaustive list of roles, however, these are some pretty common ones. So let's go through them one by one. So, programming. Programmers write code to actually build the game's functionality. So they actually build the game, they make it work. They're the people behind the technical side of things. Some programming role examples include gameplay programming, which is basically, making the game. Porting programmer, which is getting the game to work on other platforms. So, for example, if you built your game to work on PC, but you also want to release it on consoles or mobile, that's where a porting programmer comes in. And a networking programmer typically is who helps set up multiplayer functionality, like online multiplayer. Art. So artists, they help design the look of the game and create the assets which actually go in the game. So role examples here include concept artists, who they help define the look of the game from early on. They go through several iterations, so different ideas running across the rest of the team. Concept art doesn't actually go into the game itself, but it helps define what the game will look like and feel like. Character artists, they make the characters, like the models, the textures. That can be 2D or 3D, depending on the game. Environment analysis, it's quite self-explanatory, like character artists, they make the environment of the game. It can also be 2D or 3D, depending on the game. Animator, again, also quite self-explanatory. They animate things, which can be characters, objects, anything else, which can also be 2D or 3D. And then there's also a more technical option, which is a VFX artist. That is more technical, as in it involves a bit of programming knowledge, and that's basically anything which isn't like a solid object. So you have splashes, sparkles, like nice little effects that make the game look really nice. Design. So designers decide how the game works. Some role examples here include game design, which is designing how the game works, designing, what characters are there, how do they work, how do enemies work, how do power-ups work. Narrative design. They design the story of the game. They also decide the dialogue of the characters. If you've ever played a game which has branching narrative, like you can choose to do this option or this option, and they take you down different paths in the game. That's where a narrative designer comes in. Another one in design is accessibility. Accessibility is basically just making sure as many people can play the game as possible. So accommodating for people with, say, like physical disabilities or developmental disabilities, just trying to remove any barriers to entry for people who want to play your game. There's also user interface and user experience design, which is quite often stuff like, menus, icons. If you play a first-person shooter, you'll know what a HUD is, which has like your ammo and like your target reticles and stuff. UI UX design is not specific to games, like some of these disciplines aren't. Like it also comes up in like just general software and app development. Audio. So audio people design how the game sounds. So for example, you'll have like the music composer, you'll have the sound designer who designs the music and the sound effects, and sometimes on a smaller team, if they have to be more technical, they will also put that into the game as well. And there's also things like voiceover artist. So someone who does voice acting, they do the performance to bring the characters to life. QA stands for quality assurance. This is testing the game to make sure it works properly. So some role examples here include functionality testing, which is testing the game features to make sure they work, and making sure that when you press jump, you actually jump, making sure you can't accidentally jump out of the level, making sure that when an enemy hits you, you actually get damaged. Localization testing is making sure, so when games get translated into different languages, the text and the audio, sometimes the visuals and sometimes also the gameplay will also change with that. Is making sure that that works properly for every language, every region it is translated into. And there's compatibility testing, which is making sure the game works on different hardware. And now there's a few roles which don't directly work on the game, but they're still very important roles at game studios. So for example, producers. Producers make sure the game gets done on time and on budget, eliminating obstacles in development and communicating with external clients such as publishers. Biz dev is short for business development. They help the company grow by building relationships with other businesses. Community managers interact with the games community over social media. They act as the point of communication between the studio and the fans. So if the fans say, we really don't like this, we really do want this, they help communicate that back to the developers, and they also can communicate messages from the developers to the fans. Marketing managers, they help to grow the audience for the game, do market research, and define the company's brand. And there's many more. Like I said, this is a non-exhaustive list. It's also different in small studios versus large studios. In large studios, typically, your role will be more specific, more precise, because there's more people on the team when you're making a bigger game. The roles will be more hardly defined, I guess. But in small studios, you will, as people say, wear many hats. So roles are formal titles, but your responsibilities can be different each day. And again, that is especially in small studios. Like, for example, in some studios, there may be crossover between programming and design, or art and design, or biz dev and marketing. A good tip is to mention role-specific keywords on your CV, and just a general good rule is to tailor your CV for each role you apply to. And also, you're at least be good at everything. No one is. Right. Next, let's go on to education. Right, so lots of colleges and universities now have specific game development courses, but they also have courses which aren't specific to game development, but still relevant to games industry jobs, such as computer science, animation, marketing. It's worth noting it is useful to have a degree. It is a great place, university is a great place to learn to make games, to work in a team, and a degree proves that you understand that. However, in most cases in the games industry, it is not a necessary job requirement to have a degree. Quite often, studios will be happy if you can prove your skills via other means. For example, if you've got a really strong portfolio. I'd also recommend, if you go to university or college to do game design, do work outside of your coursework as well, do your own little side projects. It shows initiative, and it also means your portfolio doesn't look exactly the same as everyone else who's also on the same course as you. So it's not just about the course itself, but it's the people you meet and network with, learning collaboration. It's also the perfect place to make mistakes, because you're still learning, and you can turn these into learning experiences and treat them as positives. I would also recommend, as you're approaching the end of your course, looking into placements and internships at game studios. But other than traditional education, there's also some online learning platforms. For example, Code Academy is an online interactive platform with free coding classes in a lot of different coding languages. And if you're a complete beginner and you don't know where to start, they have a quiz on their website, which you can fill out to get an idea of what direction you want to go in. Udemy is an online teaching platform with a ton of resources, including some free ones. The paid ones go on sale, often for quite large discounts, so a lot of the time you don't need to pay full price for them. Also, each course is taught by different tutors, so check the reviews for each course before committing to it. Just go on to courses and clubs. So, Code Coven provides free game development courses exclusively for people of underrepresented genders in the games industry. They currently have applications open for their Introduction to Game Making with Unity course, so if you want to do that, get on it, ASAP. The Code Zone runs coding clubs, people of all ages, from age 6 up to adults. Younger students are taught how to use a program called Scratch, which I'll touch on more in my next slide. And older students are taught programming languages like Python and TypeScript. Also worth noting, these are all entirely online as well. It's also possible to learn entirely on your own from YouTube tutorials. So some YouTube Some notable channels include Samyam, Code Monkey, Brackies. I believe Brackies is no longer active, but the videos are all still up for you to watch. These channels all make Unity game development tutorials, but there are channels which cover other engines, other coding languages, and just game development in a more general sense. It's also worth mentioning that no one is ever done learning. You can always learn new skills. It's always helpful. Right, so I briefly touched upon game engines and coding languages, but we haven't really explained that yet, so let's look into that now. So what is a game engine? According to Wikipedia, quote, game engines are tools available to implement video games without building everything from the ground up. Basically, a game engine is a piece of software specifically for making games, in which you manage your code and assets and export it to different platforms. Not all roles involve working in engine, but it is a useful piece of knowledge to have. Unity and Unreal Engine are like the two big ones that are used by a lot of game studios, from like small to large. Some famous games made in Unity include Pokemon Go, Beat Saber, Fall Guys, Among Us, Cuphead. Some famous games made in Unreal Engine include Bioshock, Borderlands, Fortnite, and Kingdom Hearts. Godot Game Maker and RPG Maker are typically used by smaller indie studios and solo developers. Some games made with these engines include Undertale, To the Moon, Chicory, and Cassette Beasts. RPG Maker is a little more limited. It's typically just used to make like RPGs or visual novels, but it has loads of plugins and custom scripts to add extra features which aren't in the base engine. Scratch is a little different. Scratch is a high-level block-based visual programming language which is child-friendly. It's used to teach people the logic behind coding. It's free, it's available in over 70 languages, and it is the world's largest coding community for children. So most of these are free, but for ones which are paid, I'd highly recommend watching out for sales and humble bundles. So quite often you can get stuff at a pretty large discount. Also, humble bundles are good because the money goes to charity, so it's win-win. And yeah, this is a non-exhaustive list. There are plenty of other game engines available. Also, some studios will use their own proprietary engines. For example, EA uses an engine called Frostbite for their games, and just not publicly available. Alright, so we've talked about engines. Let's talk about other tools, which are also helpful. So, here's some tools and resources. So for art, one of the most popular ones is a tool called Blender. Blender is a free and open source 3D creation tool. You can use it for the entire 3D asset creation process. Modeling, texturing, rigging, animating, rendering. It's got it all, and it is very good. GIMP is a free and open source image editing tool. It is basically a free version of Photoshop. I've been using it for like 13 years now, and it has never let me down. Krita is another free and open source image editing tool that made specifically for digital painting and animation. Sprite is a tool which lets you create pixel art and animations. It's the only tool on this slide which isn't free. However, it is very good, and it's a very good price for what you get. It's usually about £15, but it's currently on sale on Steam for about £10. So I'd recommend picking that up if you're interested. It also has a free trial version, so you can try it before you buy. There's a good audio. So Audacity is a free and open source digital audio editing and recording tool. SFXR is a free and open source tool which lets you generate retro sounding 8-bit sound effects, you know, like the really old Beat Booth video games. Family Tracker is another free and open source 8-bit audio tool. However, it's making the music rather than sound effects. And then free assets for you to use. So Kenny's website has thousands of game assets you made for free use. So that's 2D art, 3D art, audio, textures, tools. This guy's a legend. He has so many assets. There's so many games to use them. Open Game Art, Free Sound, and Textures.com are what they sound like. They're websites with free art assets, free sound, and free textures. Mixamo is a tool owned by Adobe, which is the company that made Photoshop, and it's got free 3D characters and animations. With free-to-use assets, it's always a good idea to make sure you check the copyright and attribution laws. Just because they're free to use doesn't mean you could use them for anything you wish. Quite often they will ask for credit in some shape or form. Some don't, some do. It's always good to check. And again, this is a non-exhaustive list. Only a small selection of the tools and resources which are available. And again, for paid software, always look out for sales and humble bundles. Right. Let's now look at communities and useful sites. So, Game Dev London is a bit of a shameless plug here. Is a community of developers, artists, designers, and all-around gaming enthusiasts. Despite the name, we are not just based in London. We have online community members from all around the world. We are the UK's fastest growing network of game developers, and we host events like meetups, game jams, which I'll touch on more in the next slide, and challenges. We also have a podcast, which usually drops new episodes each week, which covers a range of different topics, and we get some cool guests on the show. Coding Game is a website with programming challenges that developers compete against each other to improve their skills. It's basically like gamifying learning coding, which is pretty cool. Mentoring. So these are both free mentorship programs. Limit Break is a mentorship program for underrepresented people in the UK games industry. This year's applications have closed, but they should be open again next spring. It's not open for students currently, only those who are finishing their undergraduate degree in the same year as the program. But for students, there are alternatives such as Into Games. Into Games is a non-profit organization which aims to create accessible career pathways into the games industry for people in the UK. They have a mentorship scheme with a focus on those currently underrepresented in the industry, but it is open to anyone between the ages of 13 and 25. Into Games also has more detailed information on the roles I mentioned in my role slide. You can sort by discipline or interest. So, for example, you can play, I like designing things, I like working in a team, I like solving puzzles, and they will show you the roles which are relevant to those interests. They've also got links to articles, videos, etc., which go into more detail. Itch.io is a website where anyone can play, upload, and download indie games. It's where a lot of game jams are hosted, which I'll talk more about on my next slide. GameJolt is pretty similar. It is another website where anyone can play, upload, and download indie games. We've also got a couple of trade bodies representing the UK games industry. So UKI is a trade body for the UK games and interactive entertainment industry. They host events and meetups which are great for networking. They also have loads of information on their website on the UK games industry. For example, they have a UK games map. So you can basically, there's a map of the whole UK and you can see where all the game studios are based, where all the educational institutes which teach game development are based. It's really cool just to go on it and see which ones are close to you, because there's usually more than you would expect. Tiger is a network for game developers and digital publishers, and trade association representing the UK games industry. They also have information on the UK games industry, and they host events. They have a list on the website of UK university games courses which are part of their education membership program. Right. Just some general tips. Participate in game jams is a big one. So, game jams are events where participants have to create a game from start to finish in a very limited amount of time, like a week, 48 hours, or maybe even 24 hours or less, which is kind of crazy, but some people do choose to do that. They are very fun, and they're a great way to practice game development and figure out which roles you like best. Like, it's a low stakes. It's a challenge, but it's also low stakes. So if you end up making a bad game, or you end up not finishing the game at all, it doesn't really matter. It's just an opportunity to flex your skills and have a bit of fun with friends. Some of the big game jams are Global Game Jam, which happens every January and lasts for 48 hours. GMTK, or Game Makers Toolkit Jam, which happens every July and lasts 48 hours. This year's one starts this Friday evening and ends on Sunday evening, so I'd recommend looking into that if that sounds like something that is interesting to you. And there's also another big one, Ludum Dare, which happens twice per year and has a few different formats which you could choose from, so like 48 hours, 72 hours, or even 3 weeks. It's worth mentioning as well, these game jams are all online, so you can meet up with a team in person, or you can do it from home. It is entirely up to you. Tailor your portfolio for the work you want to do, not just any work you can do. So, for example, if you want to become a 3D cartoon-style character artist, make sure your portfolio is full of 3D cartoon-style character models. Your portfolio should be your best work, not everything you've ever done. It's about quality over quantity. Say yes to opportunities you think would be beneficial to you, but trust your gut if something doesn't seem right. Generally, everything will teach you something and be beneficial to you in some way. However, if you get a bad vibe from something, maybe the workload seems unrealistic, maybe the people don't seem that nice, don't be afraid to politely decline and look for something else instead. Look at job ads for the roles you like and work on making sure you meet the criteria. For example, if you want to become a game designer, job ads for game designer roles typically have requirements such as the ability to work inside an engine, excellent communication and collaboration skills, experience working in a cross-disciplinary team, creating and maintaining design documents, and working on at least one game. So game jams are a great way to get experience if you haven't actually got any experience working on an industry title. Generally, you don't need to meet all criteria for a role. As long as you meet most of it, you are probably qualified enough. Apply for anything which you think seems like a good fit for you. The worst you'll get is a no, and the best you'll get is your dream job. So good places to look at game jobs include, there are a few game-specific job boards, such as there's one called Work with Indies, which is specifically for indie studios. Another big one is remote game jobs, which is like it says on the tin, remote game jobs you can do from home. Also, social media, particularly Twitter and LinkedIn, is where a lot of studios advertise when they're looking for roles. Network. Make yourself known, have a memorable brand or identity. Basically, just make sure people know who you are and what you're good at. Like I mentioned earlier, everyone in the UK games industry knows each other, and people often get jobs through their connections, like I have. Plus, people in the industry are generally really lovely, and you'll make a lot of great friends. Some great places to network are events like this one, social media, like I mentioned before, particularly Twitter and LinkedIn, and Discord servers. Some in-person events include WASD or WASD. Their next event is in London in September. EGX, their next event is in London in October. And the London Games Festival, which is typically around late March to early April. Last but not least, look after your well-being. Making games can be hard sometimes. No game is more important than your physical health and your mental health. Ideally, try and look for companies which have anti-crunch policies and don't expect you to work overtime. Remember to take care of yourself and make sure you get enough food, water, sleep, and exercise. That was a lot of information, and I don't expect you to remember all that because I don't. It's why I've got my speaker notes. So if there's a few things you take away from this, I think these are the most important points. If you want to work in game development, there is a role out there for you. Game development is such a collaborative industry. There's so many skill sets which are useful. Everyone's path into the industry is different and just as valid. Some people go straight into education from their first game job. Some people spend years working in another industry before moving into games. Everyone's career is different, and that's fine. There are lots of tools, resources, and communities available to help you develop your skills and meet other game developers, the ones I mentioned, and many more. And lastly, start making your own games now. That might sound a bit blunt, but it's true. There are so many free game engines, tools, asset packs, and tutorials. There is nothing stopping you from going home after this event and making your first game. The best way to learn making games is just by making games. Your first game won't be good, no one's is, but you have to get the bad games out the way first before you start making good games. And yeah, thank you for coming to my talk. And also thank you to my lovely colleagues at Game Dev London and Beta Juster who gave me suggestions and feedback. Is there any questions?
Your game development studio has published something, I assume, to be employed full time.
We're a work for hire. Oh, sorry, I'll take the mic. We're a work for hire studio. We still haven't published anything yet that is ours, but we have worked with a lot of clients on some pretty cool stuff. And we've got some pretty cool stuff in the works that I'm not allowed to say anything about. But yeah, so we have done work that is published, but it is not ours, if that makes sense. Yeah. Thank you. If that's it, I think we can probably wrap up there. Yeah, thank you everyone. I hope this was informative. Thank you.